Hi, I'm Skylar Gall, and this is my presentation on sociological imagination and my reflection behind it. So first I want to start with the significance of sociology in my life and generally. Generally, I believe sociology is very important because it gives people a better understanding of humans and human behavior and interactions. And personally, I think it's very important because it showed me how to better analyze and understand the world and people around me and the different groups around me. I also think it gave me a more in-depth view of how I viewed the world and how I judged others. And I think learning about ethnocentrism, cultural relativism, and xenocentrism really changed how I viewed others and other cultures. Next, I want to go over the sociological imagination, which is when our personal experiences and hardships are integrated into social structures and ideas. And I can personally relate to this because when I was younger, I didn't have that many friends. I was very quiet, and because of this, many people viewed me as weird. And so I was at the bottom of the social structure in our school, in our society, and at the top were all the people who were very interactive with others. They had a lot of friends. And I also think this can relate to Emile Durkheim's view of the sociological imagination, because Emile Durkheim said societies that had a lot of social integration were more interactive with each other. They wanted to spend time with each other. They were happier with each other. But societies that had less social integration and were more divided into separate groups and people had less of a connection with the others, and they were less happy hanging out with everyone else, and they just weren't as happy in the society as a whole. And I just want to go over some definitions for words I might say throughout a presentation. So first I want to start with the textbook definition of sociology, which is the scientific study of human social relationships, groups, and societies. And I got this from the introduction in lesson 1, sociology and sociological research. Next, I want to go over some of my personal definitions and paraphrase definitions of the social forces. So first is culture, which is the values, behaviors, languages, and beliefs people share that group them together and connect them. Next is social structure, which is the way that society is arranged and people are grouped specifically and socially. Socialization is when people interact and communicate with others, and it teaches them how to interact and distinguishes mannerisms and rules in society. Next, I want to go over how I personally view the relationship between the individual and society, and I personally believe they are very interconnected with each other. One could not exist without the other. Society could not exist without the individual, and the individual would not be who they are without society. I also personally believe that some individuals are involved in society more than others. Some follow every social norm they possibly could. They're viewed in society as the perfect follower. But there are some that defy social norms, and some people might view them as weird, other people might just accept them. But they go against society as a whole, but they are still formed from who they are by society's standards. Next, I want to do a micro-level analysis of personal experiences that carry significance in my life. Relation to the individual and society is when I was in 6th grade, I was very introverted, and because of this, I didn't really follow society's view of normalcy at the time. At the time, young girls my age were supposed to be very interactive. They were supposed to want to hang out with other people and make new friends, and I wasn't like that at the time, so I didn't fit into society's view of normal. I didn't follow social norms. But as I grew older and society's views of introverts and extroverts began to change, I began to be accepted more, and also I began to make friends with people who were like me. And because of this, I think that I have changed along with how society has changed. And then a macro level example of an agent of socialization that shapes individual behavior, in my opinion, is the agent of socialization of religion, because people who follow a certain religion like to base their beliefs, their languages, how they interact with others, and their behaviors off of that religion. And one example of this is Christianity, and how Christians view LGBTQ plus people as beneath them, because in their holy book it says that homosexuality is a sin, and because of this, they shape their behavior towards LGBT plus people as they're very scornful towards them. They ostracize them from society. They don't believe that they are normal in their views. And then another example is how during the Holocaust, many Nazi citizens looked down on Jewish people for the religion they followed. They persecuted them for following Judaism, and because of this, the behavior of the Nazis towards the Jewish people were shaped because of their religion. Next is how sociological theory and research can be used to help understand the relationship between individual and society, and I think it can be used because it allows researchers and sociologists to see how society or an individual is being affected closer than just observations, and some examples of this are structural functionalism, which allows people to see the physical effects of the relationship between society and the individual, and then next is conflict theory, which allows people to see the problems or conflicts that might arise from this relationship, and lastly is symbolic interactionism, which is a more micro-level, in-depth analysis of the relationship between the individual and society, and also goes more in depth about the individual and society separately instead of only as a whole. And piggybacking off of the symbolic interactionism that I just said, I believe that that is the best sociological theory to use to understand the relationship between the individual and society. And I think this because it's such a micro-level analysis, it goes more in depth about how an individual is affected or how a society is affected and how those effects help them interact with each other or stop them from interacting with each other. And I think this just gives you more information about the relationship instead of a more broader view or a more view of the effects of them. And then a research method I would use to understand the relationship between individuals and society is qualitative data. And this is because, unlike quantitative data, this is more focused on the how and why instead of numbers, so it's more of a personal connection, it's more of a personal analysis instead of just the very hard truths of numbers. And I think this is helpful because we can see more of the relationship than just statistics or numbers or variables. And also the methods of qualitative data that I would use to gather this information would be surveys and interviews of people and of their personal feelings of their relationship with society. I also would use observations of people interacting with society and their emotions and feelings associated with society, and I would observe them and see how they are reacting. And then lastly, here's just some of my works cited, which is just the what I used to get this information in my presentation. I used our textbook and all our lessons throughout the presentation. That's where I got most of my information. And then lastly, thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, you can just email me and I'll answer them to the best of my ability.